All right, everyone. So thus far we've been looking a little bit more deeper into the object and an object structure and how different properties of an object can look. In this video, we're gonna continue exploring the object and we're gonna start looking at how we can access the different properties of an object, what object methods are, and what this keyword in an object context means. To start off, we have our person object here that we created in previous video. And if I would like to access any of the properties here and just console.log them out into our JavaScript console, then I would in some way need to access this key so I could log out the coexisting values. And the way I would do this in this case is that I would just type console.log. In this case, you don't have to use console.log. You can use and get document get element by ID and print it out on the screen or alert it or whatever you want to do. But for just the case of showing, I will use console.log here. So I would like to console.log out the person's name and his age to begin with. So the way I would do this is that I would console.log like this, and then I need to access the person object first. So by this I simply write person, since that's how we have defined the name of this object. And then if I want to access, for example, Christian, I need to go into the object and access the name property of the object. And I do this by just simply putting a dot and then writing the key I'm interested in, so name. And if I would save this and then refresh, of course, our alert that is up here shows at first. Then we see that Christian is printed out on the screen. And if I would print a plus and an empty string and then write person dot age and then save, we can see that it writes Christian blank space, since we also added an empty string, and then Christian's age, which is 30 in this case. So by this dot notation, we can access the different properties of an object. And later on, when we cover arrays, we're going to go more through how we can iterate over arrays in objects and stuff. But for now, we can just see that if we print out, for example, like this again, and then plus, and then person dot interests, you can see that we will print out the entire array as well when we refresh this. And then we see coding, gaming, music, cooking. But we will look more into arrays and how to work with them in a later video. But for now, this is how we access the different properties of an object and write them out. Okay, so this is all good, and we have covered a lot of what an object can look, but there is one important thing, an object property that we haven't covered yet, and this is called an object method. And what a method is basically a function that is assigned to an object property. So, for example, if I would create a new object here called dog, for example. Const dog equals object. It can have a name, Luna. It can have a breed, golden retriever, and it can have an age which is 2. So far, these are things that we've already covered, and properties of an object that is quite simple to understand. But an object can also contain functions that belongs to only this object. So, for example, if I would write bark here and then set this equal to a function, then return simply woof. If I would call dog.bark now, then it would run this function. And we can see this by simply console.logout dog.bark. So if I would do like now, console.log dog. For example, if I would write name and then we would write that Luna, but if I would write bark like this, because bark is a function, so I need to add on these empty parentheses afterwards to declare that it's a function that I'm calling. Otherwise, I will just, if I just would write like this, I would just write out the function as a block of code. But then we should see that woof would be console.logged out here. So if I refresh now, press OK, we see woof being returned out. So an object can have, as well as it can have properties as strings and as numbers and as arrays and arrays of objects and as booleans. Objects can also have properties which we can assign functions to. And when an object has a function, we call this a method. So this is the bark method in this case. So that is what a method is. So this could be really any block of code you can think of that this would fire off here. The last thing we're going to cover in this video is something called the this keyword. And the this keyword is a quite important concept in many programming language. And in JavaScript, we use it to refer to basically the object that we are in, or that the this keyword belongs to, and through that we can access all the different properties in, for example, a function of an object just by calling any of the object's keys. And this will be clearer when I demonstrate an example. Important to note is that this keyword, even though it's in many regards is used in objects. If I would write it outside here, for example, it would belong to the window object of the application. So there's a complete window object that is the global object that contains the application. So then it would belong to that. So it's scoped to the object that it's written in. And I will demonstrate this soon. But important to note too is that the this keyword can also be used in plain HTML, like in here, for example, and on any element here, and then the this keyword refers to the HTML element that is receiving some sort of in data from a function or so on. And we will look at this later when we look at events. But for now on, I'm gonna quickly demonstrate how the this keyword look. So if we, for example, we have the dog object here, and it has bark, and we can also give it a new method that we can call presentation, which will also be a function. And as you see that I write function like this with this syntax here, is because if we write function with arrow syntax, for example, then we can't use the this keyword in these functions. So that's why it's a good practice when you're constructing objects and constructing object methods to use the older function syntax, because then you will have access to the this keyword. But if I would, for example, here want to print out Luna's name here in this presentation method that we have created, I would simply put a return statement here, and I would return this. So then I'm referring to this actual object through the this keyword, and then .name. And then we will print out Luna here. So if I press save, and I refresh this, hello world. Forgot to actually call the method too. So we can console.log dog.presentation, and then we save. And if I refresh this again, then we see that we got out Luna here. So what we get here is that when we use this, we refer to the object that we're basically scoped to. So in this case, it's the dog object. If I would, for example, do like this, console.log, and then just write this, we would see the object that we belong to. And what we can see here is that we get the window object printed out here with all of its different methods and stuff that it has, since we're not scoped to any local object that we have created here when we just console.log out this. So this is the JavaScript window object, which is the global object that contains everything that we write. So that's how this keyword works in this case. And if I would, for example, want to write out something more here, I could just say return this.name plus an empty string, and then I would say plus this.age plus this.breed. Oh, and we need to have the plus there as well. And then we should see that here we see Luna to Golden Retriever. So with this keyword, we can access the properties of the object that we're scoped to. And that is an introduction to the this keyword. We will cover the this keyword more in this course when we start looking at classes and other more advanced concepts. But for now, this is an introduction to the this keyword and how we can use it, and how the scope of the object that it belongs to works. In the next video, we will start looking at HTML events and how we can trigger different blocks of code in our JavaScript by clicking a button or doing basically anything with an element on our HTML page.